Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the subject of how do we start, and I'm thinking of the United States here primarily, how do we start rolling back the madness and insanity, the woke insanity that's permeated the educational institutions, corporate America, public service, Hollywood. We need to understand they've climbed into every cultural institution and have subverted it from within. It's been a program of appointing ideological fanatics into these roles, or bribing or scaring people. For example, someone who maybe has behaviours that they wouldn't want brought to light can be extorted. You better do this, otherwise, or else. Or people can be bribed. There's a nice waterfront mansion ready for you if you do what we want, or we can have your children put into Harvard and they'll come out with triple PhDs, no questions asked, and and so on and so forth. So that they have a degree of control. They can deliver any sparkling bauble, or make any threat, or say, hey, we'll drag you in front of any court we choose and you'll be put into prison forever, and so on. They have this degree of power, and so they control the propaganda delivery system. Now, the extent of this needs to be understood for those who aren't aware that brazen, hateful, anti-white, anti-male, anti-family, anti-Western propaganda has been aggressively pushed through all the educational institutions, including junior schools and even kindergartens, for goodness sakes. The whole idea is to completely destroy all Western white social cohesion. You completely destroy it, have it just in fragments everywhere, which means that and then bring in, of course, through mass migration, bring in folks from very different cultures and very different parts of the world, so that there's just a sort of a feudal serf miasma of people left behind, which then the globalists control and manipulate at their leisure, because laws and things won't exist. The only laws that exist are devices that the elites would use to intimidate the serfs. And that's their end goal objective, of course. So how do we then wind this back point where in corporate America, for example, in corporate America, there are traveling roadshows that say, okay, what's been going on, all this woke stuff, it's madness, it's insanity, here's why, this is what it costs you in taxes, this is why you pay the taxes you do, this is how much money gets allocated to this madness, this is how it's failing society, how it's even failing the people that it purports to be helping. Gifting the low IQ black lesbian the job as vice president of the company doesn't help anything. It doesn't achieve anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't build anything, and doesn't improve anything. And so this I think needs to be, just as there were traveling road shows to tell white people, of their white privilege, how evil they were and how they're all Nazis and yada, yada. There needs to be now road shows that counter that and say, look, all of that stuff that went before was evil, shouldn't have happened. It was an aberration in history. Somehow that the wrong people took control, and to really lay it out and say, look, this is what happened. This is how these evil people were able to do this, how they could come into your company and say, hey, straight white man, you're a fucking Nazi, Hitler. And why are you? How are you? Because we say so. And if you don't like it, we'll put you in damn fucking prison, you fucking... And so on. Yeah, we need to roll this back, which includes going into schools. There are traveling road shows that go around schools telling young boys, you're rapists. Guess what? You're a rapist. And guess what? You're a Nazi. And they don't use those terms, but fascist and so on. The slavery thing, the race grifting, the gender grifting, the LGBT grifting, all of this needs to be rolled back. So if it was supposed to help those people, then it was a horrible, horrible failure of epic proportions. It failed. And we need to, I think, point out that it was propaganda perpetrated and pushed by evil people who had no intention of helping the folks that they were using as the cover story. We're doing it to help black people. No, you weren't. You're fucking liars. And this needs to, I think, this needs to be part of a program by any administration that comes in that cares about their country, their people, their the rule of law, due legal process, common decency, facts, truth, accuracy, all of these sorts of things, because they've all gone out the window. They all get in the way of the globalist project, and they've all been discarded. And I wouldn't call it re-education. I would call it saying, look, this is the craziness. This is the madness that went on. See the madness for what it was. See the sinister intent behind it, and then roll it back through that way. Now, inevitably, they'll want the globalists will want to try and bring this race and gender and LGBT grifting and hustling back again, and it'll just make it that much harder for them. And not the people. I mean, if we look at, say, in the Soviet Union, I was surprised when the Soviet Union, communist Russia and everything, when it all fell to pieces. Eastern Europe too, because anywhere between 60 to 95% of the population, depending on when these countries became communist, anywhere between 60 and 95% of the population had never known anything but communism. They'd only ever been able to see communist propaganda, communist newspapers, communist lies, and ideological fanaticism pushed through the schools and the universities and the public service and so on. So that's all they knew. They knew nothing else. But what intrigued me when the communist Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union fell to pieces was how few people actually believed it. The vast majority of people knew they were being told bullshit. They may not have known what the truth actually was, but they knew they were being given bullshit, and they knew they were being plied with ideological fanaticism. And what happens when you get a group of ideological fanatics that they're able to push their ideological nonsense, which denies truth and denies accuracy and denies facts, which as it's an ideology inevitably does, then they go through a point of degree of departure from reality that suddenly becomes obvious to everybody. That okay, well, I don't know what the truth actually is, but I know these guys are not telling it. And that's the situation that they were in. And so very few people believed it. And this seemed to be a shock to the elite communists. They just assumed that they could tell lies, and as people didn't know any better because they only had these lies to be told, that's all they had. They could only consume the lies in terms of information and the news and so on. That they assumed that, well, people must be believing it. And they were quite shocked when they realized that actually very few people were believing it. And this seemed to survive. And this is the same, I think, generally, whenever you're pushing an ideology that departs from reality, and we've certainly had that in the West since the globalists have achieved some sort of preeminence, that they now believe, or they got to a point of believing that everyone believed the lies that they were telling them. In fact, very few do. So I think the rollback of the wokeness won't be as difficult as you might imagine. I think most people will be relieved, and there'll be very few. Now, there are minorities, ideological fanatics and that sort of thing, and they not so much they believe the lies, but the lies protect them from a reality they don't want to ever have to face. So removing the lies means they must face reality, and they're terrified of that. So nonetheless, I think whether it be universities or museums or any cultural institution, there needs to be, I believe, a plan and a formula to roll back the woke madness, which includes getting rid of any of the woke, ideological fanatical warriors, getting rid of them and recrafting the policies, the processes and so on to reflect the reality. There were times not that long ago when I could go into a museum and it would just be factual, museum stuff. And then it was the museums were being converted into hysterical political propaganda woke factories where that's all they are. They're now being used to reprogram people using the most absurd and hysterical, over-the-top propaganda. Museums should return to being a neutral cultural institution, and as should the arts, as should drama, and so on. And the idea of funding, again, ideological fanatics to push propaganda, that's got to go across the board. Every institution, arts, culture, and so on, needs to be looked at, and that being reversed. Now, if people want to, the LGBTQ drama club wants to put on plays and so on to do that, and the paying public want to see it, that's okay. I got no problem with that. That they should have their voice, and if they want to push radical propaganda, fine. You go ahead and do it. And if you can get people to come and watch it and pay for it, well done. All power to you. And the same goes for you want to have a sci-fi movie that stars only angry black lesbians denouncing everyone as being a Nazi. Go ahead and do it. But fine, if you can get people to come on and pay for that, you're not getting any tax breaks to use public money to do it. But if you can make a movie like that and get people to come and watch it, you go right ahead. I got no problem with that at all. It can be called the star, the black lesbian star thing. You go ahead and do it. No problem with it. Now, the reality is that unless you get generous tax break money to hand it out to you to produce the propaganda, and you get a producer called Stein or Berg to come and put it together for you, unless you've got that, no one's going to come and watch it. No one's going to see. You're not going to make a nickel with a rubbish, idiotic crap movie like that. But if you want to do it and you can get someone to pay for it, I think go ahead. Nothing's stopping you. Don't invade franchises that I like to watch or once liked to watch. Don't do that. But go and make your own. If there's a market for your hateful, horrible, vindictive propaganda, then go ahead and do your movies. Go ahead and do that stuff. And if people want to pay for it, then you find those people and you appeal to them. And I've got no problem with that at all. But don't invade my franchises and my museums and my cultural institutions with your horrible, hateful, shithead propaganda. And this is something I think needs to be rolled back, and the people who've done it need to be held accountable and at the very least fired from their jobs. You've been at Tassus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.